we have an easier way than impeachment. It's called an election. And based on his record right now, his own party doesn't want him. Why give them a lifeline of something to rally around as opposed to saying, let them hang themselves right now? I agree with you. Let's build the case, make that part of the campaign, but make Democrats who have been shielded from the facts of what he's done in the past to have to acknowledge some of the shady business dealings, then give them something sympathetic to rally around. And your point on Clinton and Trump is exactly right. It's strengthened them politically.
Well, and when you do that, you're going to put a lot of these House Democrats and Senate Democrats in a position where they're going to have to defend Joe Biden.
Right.
They're not going to want to do that. When it's been clearly established, not just within the Republican caucus, but in the general mainstream of American thought, that Joe Biden took millions of dollars from the Chinese, the Ukrainians, from Russian oligarchs. He put it in his pocket. This isn't about Hunter anymore. This is about Joe. Joe compromised his office as vice president and as president. He enriched himself off the money of foreign enemies, and he didn't pay taxes on it, and he didn't file FARA reports on it, and it was a family enterprise, and he was involved. He has repeatedly lied about it. Now, ask a Senate Democrat who's campaigning for re-election to go and defend Joe Biden on that. Right. Good luck. That's why I say that I hope we play this smart rather than play it passionately. I do worry that you've got some House members that, they're just so giddy about going after Joe Biden and getting on the floor and making speeches. Look, we got to play the long game, not the short game. And we need to play smart and not play reckless. And so nobody from the House Freedom Caucus or anyone else has asked for my opinion on this, but I'm happy to share it with you. And if you want to pass it on to them, I'm simply saying some of them are angry at Kevin McCarthy because he hasn't just gone out to the range, loaded the gun, and started shooting. Quite frankly, I'm grateful that he's taking his time and he's being far more cautious and methodical. We need to win the elections of 2024. That's job one. And whatever it takes to do that, that's the critical thing. Because if the Biden administration continues weaponizing the DOJ and the FBI, continually criminalizing the free speech of pro-life conservative people, then it honestly doesn't matter whether Joe gets impeached or not, because we lose the big game in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, if we lose the House of Representatives, there's nothing. I mean, they go completely unchecked. There is no oversight. There's no stopping the agenda. I do want to move to spending, because that one, here's what I don't understand. And I've said this to the audience before. I've been doing this 30 years. I don't want to sound like I'm naive, but at some point, these guys passed the debt ceiling increase, and I get it. I understand the economic consequences of not doing that, but the deal was sort of, then let's make the fight about appropriations. There seems to be, and again, I'll put the blame on Republicans here. Why isn't there, do you think, a better case about the excesses of government in terms of spending, the growth of bureaucracy? There's no examples, right? Meaning that right now we're fighting over top line numbers. Those don't mean anything to most Americans because you don't know the underlying, how much does this department cost? How much are we spending here? But the point that I've tried to make to several lawmakers over the last few months is find examples of wasteful spending and say, you made this case about the impeachment. Put this to Democrats and say, do you guys believe that this program from 1828 that funds is still relevant today? Because you're charging a taxpayer, to essentially continue that function of government. We're not making, I don't think, a good enough case about where we go with spending. And right now we're careening towards a government shutdown.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Make the Democrats defend the manner in which they're spending our money. Make them defend it. Far too long, Republicans play defense, and it's almost like they don't understand. We're supposed to get the ball too. We're supposed to have an offensive game, not just a defensive game. Right. No team wins football if all you do is have a great defense. You might end up with a scoreless tie, but you have to have an offense and put points on the board or you don't win. And sometimes Republicans say, man, we're great defenders. I'm sorry. Get the ball, take it down the field, and score. And you do that by making the Democrats play defense. And helping the American people to understand how their money is being spent, and people will be outraged. Helping them understand what the debt and the deficit do to their family's food budget and gasoline budget and education budget. Those are the kind of things that Republicans have to do. And, when people say, oh, we could have a shutdown, there's worse things that might happen, and that is that we just let government continue to spin us into oblivion. I may not live long enough to see the full impact of that, but my children and my grandchildren will.
But this gets back to the point that I was trying to make, which is I feel like we're in a bind now. We've got less than 20 days or the government shuts down. And everyone says, I don't want a government shutdown. And it seems like there's this binary choice between funding the government at certain levels or shutting the government down. I feel like we've waited to the last second again, whereas we could have used the last 11 months to say, start weeding out some of this ridiculous spending and inefficiency in government. That being said, and I know this is a tough thing, but to the extent that members of Congress have an option, what do you think it is? I mean, because I feel like it's a false choice. It's like, well, you either fund the government at these higher levels or you let it shut down. I don't know. I mean, I get we don't have a ton of time, but I don't think that that's the only answer.
Well, Sean, you and I think both know the real reason that this is coming down to the final moments, and that is because Republicans, for the most part, they like to spend money almost as much as Democrats. And that's just the hard, unvarnished truth. So they have pet projects and they have things in their districts that they don't want to give up. And it's a lot of deal making, some of which I understand. That's how the process works. But let's not kid ourselves. The reason that Republicans ultimately make these last minute deals and keep the spending levels up is because they want to spend money on the projects that are important to them. And so it's not about the principle of a solvent, responsible U.S. government in the way it raises money and spends money. It's how can I be reelected? And one of the ways is I take good care of my donor buddies and I take good care of those who I think will vote for me if I give them largesse out of the Treasury. And so I wish that there was a moment at which Republicans just said, I'm not going to vote for this. It's there's too much lard, in the pot. And yeah, we want to fry the chicken, but we don't want to taste nothing but the grease. So we're just going to say no. And I don't know if
let's get back to what I was asking. I don't see, I mean, if I had a crystal ball right now, I'd say we're shutting down. I mean, October 1, I don't see a solution. I just don't see it. There's 5 or 6 of these guys. The thing that people don't really understand about the math right now on the Republican side, everyone says they have a 5-seat majority. They don't. For health reasons, we're about to see Chris Stewart in Utah step down. We haven't, right, and so we'll lose another member. He doesn't have the same 4 or 5 votes that he had to become speaker. This is down to a 1 or 2 vote margin. And I don't see enough votes to keep the government going. So unless I'm wrong, I think we're headed for at least a month or so of government shutdown.
I think you're right. I think we probably will. I remember when it happened before and everyone thought the world would come to an end. Newt Gingrich was speaker at that time. And quite frankly, it hurt Republicans more than it hurt Democrats because the president at that time, Bill Clinton, was able to lay the blame at the feet of Newt Gingrich. And people accepted that. There's one chief executive, there's 535 members of Congress. So it's easy to dilute the impact or the strength of members of Congress.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure you click the link below to find out more, or you can go to SeanSpicerShow.com to stay up to date on all my content.